Thank you, Joel. And thank you, Dean. We've been working this year through the Science of Mind textbook. And so as Dean mentioned, we're going through individual passages day by day in order to understand the principles and the foundations and the basics of this idea that we call the science of mind. I think it's quite extraordinary to watch as the practitioners get faced with the lesson of the week and find themselves in a place of, oh my God. Yeah. I think that it's indicative of what's happening in the world for all of us. And this idea that the world as we know it is coming to an end. That it is no longer the same world that it was yesterday, a year ago, 10 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. The world is changing. It changes every day. What's happening is that our perception, our individualized perception of what's going on is changing ever more rapidly than it used to. And you might wonder, well, why is our perception moving so much faster today than it was when perhaps our grandparents were alive? As I mentioned earlier, I was doing some reflecting on some past and different things, and I had to do some research around my family genealogy, and I never knew my grandfathers because both of them had passed long before I was born. In fact, my paternal grandfather had died in 1919 when my father was only like 4.5 years old. And as I began to think about the difference in the time and the place and the way that things happen, it just kind of like rushed over me that what we are doing within and amongst ourselves is evoluting and bringing forth a new consciousness that has not been an experience yet by the majority or the masses. It's been there. Individuals have possessed it. And if you noticed in the reading that was set for today, it's in the section of the Science of Mind book that Ernest Holmes has set out that are the teachings of Jesus. Now, some people look at Science of Mind and they think we have nothing to do with Jesus, or nothing to do with Christianity, or nothing to do with religion as it has been. But the truth of it is that we are totally embodied and embraced and integrated with all of the religions and all of the faiths and all of the teachings through all times. We've just brought them together into a correlation of understanding of how these come together in this idea that there is philosophy and there is science and there is religion. And Ernest Holmes, in a way, he, the founder of our movement, in a way that he was able to do it, brought it forth into an idea that began as this thing called New Thought. And it wasn't really a new thought, but for him it was the New Thought, the New Age, the new perspective of life and the way that it's showing up in the world today. And it's been accumulating since time infinite. Because consciousness is something that evolves. consciousness is something that has to grow, something that has to transform and change and become even greater in order for us to have this full experience of the divine. And it's the only way we're going to get there. Dean said, wouldn't it be great if we had an easy pill or an easy button or something that said, well, let me just change my life. Whew, there we are. Do it by magic. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Well, the reality of it is, it does not work that way. Your experience, where you are in life today, is dependent upon how you have looked at what is going on with your life and how you have integrated it into something meaningful and purposeful. That's why we keep going back to prayer, forgiveness, focus, in order to reach this abundant universe. Because it's a process that must be worked. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was Wednesday night. Who knows where time goes in my mind. But there was a comment that was made by Albert Einstein, one of the greatest minds in our time, that said that really this is just all in process. Everything is in process, and it's through intelligence, it's through consciousness that we get to a greater place of understanding, and it's not going to be easy. If it was easy, then there would be no purpose for us to have this experience of humanness. We would revert back to our perfect, whole, divine, spiritual self. That's where it's easy. That's where the grace lives. That's where there is divine intelligence. That's where there is absolute wholeness and perfection, is in your spiritual being. If you want it easy, then you need to be in your spiritual being. You need to be living a spiritual life. You need to be a center for spiritual living in the essence of who you are. If you choose to be human, and it is a choice, you have made someplace, somewhere along this line of consciousness, a choice to be human. And with the humanness comes the experience of the physical body, the physical world, the physical universe, and all that is tossed into this huge conglomerate mix of the world. And we call that the race consciousness. The consciousness of everybody and everything in all times thrown in together in one big pot. And depending on, whoever happens to be stirring the pot at that time will determine where you're going to show up and how you're going to be impacted or influenced in this big mix of life. So we like to say that, we are responsible for our life. We are the creators of our life. But then things show up and I'm going, I did not create that. I didn't ask for that. That was not my intention. There are some things that show up in my life that I have and am not willing to take any responsibility for whatsoever. And I'm learning not to make anybody else responsible for it either. There's a fine line there. There's a very important key there to understand. That it is the experience of life that it is happening because we have chosen to be in human form, and that's the way it's going to be until it evolves to something higher, something greater, something more magnificent. But until then, there